Something just broke in the silver market. And this time, it's not a glitch. It's not a technical error. It's not market volatility. This is the sound of a major European bank being squeezed until it bleeds metal. Ladies and gentlemen, I need you to stop what you're doing and listen to me very carefully. Because what I'm about to show you represents the most significant shift in the precious metals landscape that we have witnessed in decades. We are watching the real-time transfer of power from one banking giant to another, and the weapon being used isn't cash. It's 3 million ounces of physical silver. Deutsche Bank has just been forced to deliver 3 million ounces of silver to JPMorgan Chase. 3 million ounces. That's not a routine transaction. That's not normal market flow. That's a bank bleeding out its precious metals inventory under what appears to be extraordinary pressure. But here's where this story gets dark. JPMorgan didn't just receive this metal. They absorbed it into a position that now represents roughly 80% control of a critical segment of the physical silver market. 80%. Think about what that means. Think about what that level of concentration does to price discovery. Think about what happens when one entity controls that much of anything. The mainstream financial media isn't covering this. The financial press that spent months obsessing over bank stress tests and capital ratios has gone completely silent about a 3 million ounce forced delivery. Why? Because this isn't the kind of story that fits their narrative. This is the kind of story that reveals how the system actually works when the pressure gets real. Deutsche Bank didn't wake up this morning and decide to hand over 3 million ounces of silver to their biggest competitor. Banks don't voluntarily surrender strategic assets. Banks don't voluntarily reduce their precious metals inventory during a period of unprecedented industrial demand. This was forced. The question isn't whether Deutsche was pressured. The question is what kind of pressure was applied. And when you dig into the mechanics, the story gets even more disturbing. This wasn't a gradual unwinding over weeks. This was forced delivery executed within days, possibly hours. The kind that happens when someone gets a margin call they can't meet. Sources in London report lease rates for silver went parabolic over the past week. We're talking about levels not seen since the Hunt brothers crisis in 1980. Someone was so desperate for 3 million ounces of physical silver that they were willing to pay almost anything to get it. And that someone had the power to force Deutsche Bank to deliver it. Look at the timing. We are in the middle of the most acute silver shortage in modern history. Industrial demand is screaming higher. Solar panel production is consuming silver at rates that would have been unimaginable just 5 years ago. Electric vehicle manufacturing is pulling silver out of the market at an accelerating pace. The defense industry is stockpiling strategic metals at levels not seen since the Cold War. But there's something else happening that most people don't understand. The geopolitical dimension of this Deutsche Bank squeeze goes far deeper than market dynamics. We are watching the weaponization of precious metals in real time. China controls approximately 60% of global silver refining capacity. Russia is a major silver producer. Both countries have been systematically reducing their exposure to Western financial institutions while increasing their physical precious metals reserves. The message is clear. Physical assets, not paper promises, determine real wealth and real power. And now, JPMorgan has positioned themselves as the Western response to Eastern accumulation. By forcing Deutsche Bank to deliver 3 million ounces, they have consolidated Western precious metals control under American banking authority. This isn't just about market share. This is about ensuring that if there's a precious metals war between East and West, the United States has a champion that can compete. Deutsche Bank, as a European institution, was a wild card in this equation. European banks answer to European regulators and European political interests, but JPMorgan answers to American interests. By absorbing Deutsche Bank's precious metals inventory, JPMorgan has eliminated a potential European competitor and consolidated control under American financial hegemony. And in the middle of this industrial frenzy, Deutsche Bank surrenders 3 million ounces to JPMorgan. This isn't market dynamics. This is something else entirely. Let me walk you through what 3 million ounces actually represents. The entire registered inventory of the COMEX, the metal that backs the paper silver market that determines the global price, hovers around 30 to 40 million ounces on a good day. Deutsche just handed over roughly 8 to 10% of that entire inventory to JP Morgan in a single transaction. But the numbers get more terrifying when you understand the velocity of this market. 3 million ounces isn't just sitting in a vault somewhere. In the modern precious metals market, that same metal gets pledged, leased, rehypothecated, and used as collateral for multiple transactions simultaneously. Industry sources estimate that each ounce of physical silver in the system supports between 5 and 10 ounces worth of paper claims. That means Deutsche Bank's 3 million ounce delivery to JP Morgan potentially represents 15 to 30 million ounces worth of market exposure being transferred from European control to American control. We're not just talking about the physical metal. We're talking about the paper pyramid that sits on top of that metal. And here's the truly disturbing part. Deutsche Bank didn't just lose 3 million ounces of silver. They lost the ability to use those 3 million ounces as collateral for other operations. They lost the lease income from that metal. They lost the rehypothecation flexibility that comes with holding precious metals inventory. They essentially lost a money printing machine that was generating revenue across multiple business lines. JP Morgan didn't just acquire metal. They acquired a revenue-generating engine that was previously generating profits for their competition. But the registered inventory is an illusion. Most of that metal is already committed. Most of it is already spoken for by existing contracts and industrial users. The amount of truly available, unencumbered silver in the COMEX system is a fraction of what the official numbers suggest, which means Deutsche didn't just hand over 3 million ounces. They handed over a significant portion of the free float, and JP Morgan took it, all of it. But here's what the mainstream media isn't telling you about JP Morgan's 80% control. This isn't just about market share. This is about dictating terms to entire industries. When Tesla needs silver, when Samsung needs silver, when the US military needs silver, they don't go to a competitive marketplace anymore. They go to JP Morgan. And JP Morgan sets the price. JP Morgan sets the terms. JP Morgan decides who gets metal and who waits. This is what economic warfare looks like in the modern age. It's not fought with tariffs or sanctions. It's fought with the strategic accumulation of physical assets that entire industries depend on for survival. And JP Morgan just won a major battle. The timing of this Deutsche Bank squeeze isn't coincidental. We are less than 60 days away from a series of major industrial contracts coming up for renewal. Solar panel manufacturers in Asia are scrambling to secure silver supplies for the next 18 months. Electric vehicle companies are looking at production schedules that require unprecedented amounts of silver. Defense contractors are facing procurement deadlines that can't be missed. And now JP Morgan controls 80% of the metal they all need. Think about the negotiating power that gives them. Think about the premiums they can charge. Think about the political influence that comes with controlling a strategic resource that entire economies depend on. Now, JP Morgan controls 80% of what matters in this market. Not 80% of all silver. 80% of the silver that moves. 80% of the silver that sets prices. 80% of the silver that industrial users depend on when they need to source material for production. This is what a corner looks like in real time. But here's what makes this truly terrifying. Deutsche Bank isn't some minor player in the precious metals space. They are one of the largest bullion banks in the world. They have been a major market maker in precious metals for decades. They have vaults in London. They have trading desks in New York. They have relationships with miners, refiners, and industrial users across the globe. And they just got squeezed out. If Deutsche Bank, with all their resources and all their connections, can be forced to deliver 3 million ounces to JP Morgan, what does that tell you about the balance of power in this market? What does that tell you about who is really in control when the pressure gets applied? The retail silver market is already feeling the impact. Silver Eagle availability has essentially evaporated. Dealers who have been in business for decades are reporting supply chains that have simply stopped functioning. Lead times that used to be measured in days are now measured in weeks and in some cases months. This isn't about retail investors buying coins. This is about the wholesale destruction of the supply chain that feeds the retail market. When JP Morgan absorbs 3 million ounces from Deutsche Bank, that metal doesn't just disappear from Deutsche's balance sheet, it disappears from the market entirely. JP Morgan doesn't sell, they accumulate. They have been accumulating for years. Every time there has been a crisis in the precious metals market, every time there has been forced selling, every time another institution has found itself under pressure, JP Morgan has been there to absorb the metal. And now they control 80% of the flow. Think about what this means for price discovery. In a normal market, prices are set by the interaction between buyers and sellers with multiple participants creating competition and transparency. But when one entity controls 80% of the available supply, price discovery breaks down. The price becomes whatever that entity decides it should be. JP Morgan isn't just a market participant anymore, they are the market. And this Deutsche Bank transaction proves it. 3 million ounces moved from one vault to another, and the entire structure of the silver market shifted. Not because of supply and demand fundamentals, not because of industrial usage patterns, not because of mining production changes, because one bank squeezed another bank until they bled metal. The implications extend far beyond silver. If JP Morgan can force Deutsche Bank to deliver 3 million ounces of silver, what else can they force? What other positions are underwater? What other banks are sitting on precious metals inventory that they can't afford to defend? This is the beginning of a consolidation that will reshape the entire precious metals landscape. The weak hands are being shaken out. Not retail investors this time, not small mining companies. Major European banks, and the entity doing the shaking is JP Morgan Chase. But the story gets darker when you look at the broader context. Deutsche Bank isn't just any bank. They are systemically important to the European financial system. They are counterparty to thousands of other institutions across multiple asset classes. When Deutsche Bank gets squeezed in precious metals, the ripple effects don't stay contained to precious metals. And Deutsche Bank isn't the only European bank with precious metals exposure. Credit Suisse has significant silver positions. BNP Paribas is a major player in the London bullion market. Societe Generale has trading desks that depend on precious metals inventory for their operations. If JP Morgan can force Deutsche Bank to deliver 3 million ounces, what's stopping them from targeting the next bank? What's stopping them from systematically squeezing every major European competitor until they control 95%? This is how monopolies are born. Not through organic growth, but through systematic elimination of competition using tactics most people never see. The European Central Bank has to be watching this. They have to understand what a JP Morgan monopoly in precious metals means for European financial sovereignty. But what can they do? Print euros and try to outbid JP Morgan for physical silver? Launch an investigation that JP Morgan will fight with an army of lawyers? JP Morgan has positioned themselves beyond the reach of traditional regulatory responses. They control the physical reality that underlies the paper markets. And physical reality doesn't care about regulatory jurisdiction. Currency markets react. Bond markets react. Equity markets react. The 3 million ounce delivery to JP Morgan isn't just about silver. It's about the redistribution of financial power at the highest levels of the global banking system. And that redistribution is happening right now in real time, while most people are completely unaware that it's occurring. The retail silver shortage is just the visible symptom of a much deeper structural shift. When eagles disappear from coin shops, when premiums spike to historic levels, when delivery times stretch to months, what you're seeing isn't just supply and demand imbalance. You're seeing the downstream effects of JP Morgan's 80% control being exercised. But the retail shortage is about to get much worse. The 3 million ounces that Deutsche Bank delivered to JP Morgan weren't sitting in some vault collecting dust. That metal was actively being used to supply the retail market. Coin dealers, precious metals retailers, small institutional buyers. They all depended on Deutsche Bank's willingness to sell metal into the market to keep their shelves stocked. Now that metal is in JP Morgan's vault, and JP Morgan doesn't sell to retail, they accumulate from retail, the major precious metals dealers are reporting something unprecedented, Not just higher premiums or longer wait times, but actual allocation systems. For the first time in decades, dealers are having to limit how much silver individual customers can buy. Not because of price, but because of pure availability. One major dealer in Texas told me off the record that they have had to implement a lottery system for silver eagles. A lottery system for U.S. legal tender currency. Think about what that means. Think about what happens to a market when legal tender becomes so scarce that you need to win a lottery to buy it. But the retail shortage is just the tip of the iceberg. Industrial users are facing something far more serious. Manufacturing companies that have relied on just-in-time delivery of silver for their production processes are being forced to completely restructure their operations. Companies that used to be able to source silver with a few days' notice are now being quoted lead times of months if they can get quotes at all. I've been in contact with a procurement manager at a major electronics manufacturer who told me they have been forced to redesign entire product lines because they can no longer guarantee silver availability. They are substituting inferior materials and accepting reduced performance because the silver simply isn't there. This is what economic warfare looks like at the ground level. Not dramatic headlines or stock market crashes, but quiet supply chain disruptions that force companies to make products that don't work as well, cost more to produce, and deliver less value to consumers. And all of this traces back to JPMorgan's 80% control and their willingness to squeeze competitors like Deutsche Bank until they surrender their inventory. And this is just the beginning. The 3 million-ounce Deutsche Bank delivery was JPMorgan flexing their muscles. It was a demonstration of power designed to send a message to every other bank, every other institution, every other entity that thought they could compete in the precious metals space. The message is simple. We control this market now. Play by our rules or get squeezed out. They control the flow. They control the price. They control who gets metal and who doesn't. And Deutsche Bank just proved that even major European banks don't get metal if JPMorgan decides they don't. This is what a rigged market looks like when the rigging becomes visible. For years, precious metals investors have suspected that large banks manipulate prices through paper contracts and derivatives. But this Deutsche Bank transaction is different. This isn't paper manipulation. This is the physical seizure of 3 million ounces of actual metal. The paper games are ending. The physical reality is taking over, and in that physical reality, JPMorgan controls 80% of what matters. But here's what makes this moment historically significant. We are witnessing the transition from a paper-based precious metals market to a physical-based precious metals market happening in real time. For decades, the price of silver was set by trading activity on the COMEX, by derivative contracts and futures speculation. The physical market followed the paper market. That relationship just reversed. The Deutsche Bank delivery proves that physical control now trumps paper games. JPMorgan didn't acquire 80% control through clever derivatives trading or algorithmic manipulation. They acquired it by forcing the physical delivery of actual metal. This is what the end of the paper-silver market looks like. Not a dramatic crash or a regulatory shutdown, but a quiet absorption of physical inventory by one dominant entity until paper contracts become irrelevant. And once paper contracts become irrelevant, price discovery moves to the physical market, which means price discovery moves to wherever JPMorgan decides it should happen. They don't just control 80% of the silver market now, they control 80% of the mechanism that determines what silver is worth. The Deutsche Bank squeeze wasn't just about 3 million ounces. It was about JPMorgan demonstrating that they have moved beyond market manipulation into market ownership. And market ownership means they don't have to manipulate prices anymore. They can simply set them. The historical parallels are chilling. In 1979 and 1980, the Hunt brothers attempted to corner the silver market by accumulating physical metal and taking delivery on futures contracts. Their operation ultimately failed, but not before silver prices spiked from single digits to over $50 per ounce. The Hunt brothers were eventually stopped by regulatory intervention and changes to exchange rules. But JPMorgan isn't the Hunt brothers. They aren't oil speculators from Texas trying to corner a market from the outside. They are the market. They are integrated into every level of the financial system. They are the custodian for the largest silver ETF. They are one of the primary dealers for the Federal Reserve. They are too big to fail and too connected to shut down. When the Hunt brothers cornered silver, the regulators could change the rules to stop them. What rules can regulators change to stop JPMorgan? What authority do they have over an institution that holds 80% of the physical silver market through legitimate business transactions? The answer is none. JPMorgan has achieved something the Hunt brothers never could: a corner on silver that is regulatory proof, politically untouchable, and systemically essential. And the Deutsche Bank delivery proves that their corner is complete. The question isn't whether this will continue. The question is how far JPMorgan will push their advantage before the system breaks completely. Because at some point, when one entity controls too much of a critical market, the market stops functioning as a market and starts functioning as a monopoly. We may already be at that point. The Deutsche Bank delivery is the proof. 3 million ounces. 80% control. Eagle's gone. The squeeze isn't coming. The squeeze is here. And it's bigger than anyone imagined.